Karen told me people like you don't belong in first class. People like you don't belong in first class.
Federal Air Marshal.
I just faced the worst Karen in aviation history. A woman who turned my flight into her personal stage, tried to bully her way into the cockpit, and told me that people like me didn't belong in first class. She said, "I don't need rules. I'm too important." Little did she know, I was a Federal Air Marshal assigned to her flight, and her little stunt was about to end in federal handcuffs. But let me start at the beginning. The air in the terminal at LAX hung thick and stale, a familiar perfume of industrial floor cleaner, burnt jet fuel, and low-grade human anxiety. I sat slumped in a worn-out vinyl chair near gate 72B, just another ghost waiting for another red-eye. Hoodie up, sunglasses on, even though the California sun had surrendered hours ago. To the world, I was Fred Monk, a mid-level logistics consultant, probably flying back to some spreadsheet-filled purgatory in Denver. I looked tired. I looked boring. I looked like the kind of guy you wouldn't remember 5 seconds after looking away. Inside, I was Federal Air Marshal Fred Monk, and my job was to make sure this giant mail tube full of strangers arrived in one piece. This particular route had been flagged, not for a specific terror threat. Those are rare these days, but for a statistical blip, twitch in the web, more passenger incidents, more diversions, a higher rate of alcohol-fueled aggression. So, the agency sent guys like me to babysit the sky. My best friend Dave, a high school history teacher who finds genuine excitement in grading essays on a Louisiana Purchase, thinks my job is pure adrenaline. He imagines Die Hard. He imagines gunfights in the galley. He doesn't get the reality. The reality is hours of forced stillness. It's analyzed in the way a man fidgets with his carry-on, or the tremor in a woman's voice when she orders a coffee. It's a quiet that wears you down, not the noise. You have to become part of the background, a piece of furniture that breathes. But tonight, the quiet didn't last long. The noise arrived in the form of a woman who moved through the gate area like a low-pressure weather system, sucking all the calm out of the room. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew her type immediately. We call them high-value targets, not because they are VIPs, but because they require a high volume of our attention. She was dressed in what I assumed was airport chic. Oversized sunglasses, a tracksuit that cost more than my car, enough luggage to colonize a small island. Her voice was a finely tuned weapon, loud enough to command attention, but pitched just shy of an outright scream. And, of course, she was holding a phone in front of her face on a pink, jewel-encrusted gimbal. The lens was pointed at her, the screen reflecting her perfectly coiffed, indignant expression. She was live streaming. "And you will not believe the absolute incompetence at this check-in counter, guys," she announced to her invisible audience, spinning in a circle and nearly hitting a teenager with her designer tote bag. They had the audacity, the absolute audacity, to try and weigh my carry-on, as if I, a million-miler status holder, don't know the rules better than they do. She paused, letting the manufactured outrage settle, checking her screen for likes and comments. A few people in the waiting area looked up from their phones, annoyed, then quickly looked away. Nobody wants to make eye contact with a storm. I just watched. I lowered my head slightly, peering over the rim of my cheap drugstore sunglasses. An older guy across from me, looking like a retired mechanic, leaned in and muttered, "Is she rehearsing for a play?" "Off Broadway." I whispered back, not breaking my scan. "Very off." He snorted. "Hope it's a short show." "Depends on the audience," I said. "And her audience is already enabling her. People like her. Let's call her Karen. Though I'd later learn her name was Karen Tillman. Believe the rules are for everyone else. They view regulations as personal insults and fellow passengers as props in their daily drama. My Uncle Peter used to say, some people walk through life like they're the only ones with a script. Karen Tillman was a writer, director, and star of her own terrible movie, and we were all just unpaid extras. The gate agent, a weary woman who looked like she was counting the seconds until retirement, picked up the microphone. "We are now ready to begin boarding for first class and active duty military." Karen, who had been standing strategically close to the podium, pushed forward instantly. Her rolling bag acted as a small battering ram. She cut right in front of an elderly couple, flashing her boarding pass as if it were a royal decree. "Excuse me," the old man said politely. We were in line. Karen didn't even look at him. She addressed her phone. "See? This is why you need priority boarding. You have to be aggressive in this world, or people just walk all over you." The irony was thick enough to choke on. I waited for my group, mingling with the other tired souls in group 2. My process is always the same. Blend in. Observe. Don't draw a single glance. I'm just another guy in a gray hoodie. The most forgettable man in the room. I filed onto the jet bridge. My single duffel bag was slung over my shoulder, light, containing little more than a paperback book I'll never read, and the tools of my trade. A SIG Sauer P229 tucked deep in a retention holster, a set of flex cuffs, and my badge. When I stepped onto the plane, the familiar scent of recycled air and faint disinfectant greeted me. The flight attendants offered tired smiles. I nodded back, a small, imperceptible gesture. Karen was already established in seat 1C, the aisle seat in the first row of first class. It's the power seat. You control the flow. Her phone was now propped up on her tray table, still recording. She was loudly complaining to the flight attendant about the lack of a pre-departure beverage. "I mean, what is the point of status if there's no service?" she whined. "I need hydration. My skin is literally dying in this air." My seat was 2A, the window seat directly behind her. First class on this narrow-body jet was a 2-to-2 layout. Tight lanes, clean sight lines to the galley and the cockpit door. It was built for quick moves. It was the perfect vantage point. As I moved to pass her to get to row 2, the aisle narrowed. My duffel bag maybe brushed the air an inch from her shoulder. I didn't touch her. I was careful. But she reacted as if I'd slapped her. Her head snapped around, her eyes cold and assessing. She scanned my simple hoodie, my worn jeans, my generic sneakers. A sneer curled her lip. She didn't lower her voice. She wanted the cabin and her online audience to hear it. "Oh, great," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "They're letting economy board to the front now? Or did you just get lost?" She held the beat, letting the insult land. "People like you don't usually sit in first class. I hope you know how to behave. Don't recline your seat into my space." The cabin went quiet. The elderly woman she cut off earlier leaned out from across the aisle and stage whispered to her husband, "Honey, he looks cleaner than her soul. And better shoes," the husband added. I kept my face still, but my inside voice applauded. A few heads turned. A businessman in 2C flinched, looking embarrassed on her behalf. I felt a familiar cold spark ignite in my gut. It was the petty part of me, the human part, that wanted to say something dry and cutting. I wanted to tell her that my cheap sneakers were tactical gear designed for traction on a wet galley floor. I wanted to tell her that I was the only person on this plane authorized to carry a weapon. But that wasn't the job. The job was to be gray, to be invisible. So I did nothing. I showed no reaction. I simply paused, met her gaze for a single flat second, dead eyes, no emotion, and then continued to my seat. "I'm in 2A, I said quietly, sliding past her. "Unbelievable," she huffed, turning back to her phone. "The standards are dropping every day, guys. It's tragic." I slid my bag into the overhead bin, sat down, and buckled my seat belt. I didn't look at her again. I kept count. The core question started to hum in the back of my mind, the one that always surfaces with people like her. What makes someone untouchable, really? Is it money? Status? The number of followers on a social media app? She genuinely believed she was insulated from consequence. She had no idea who or what was sitting in 2A. The plane door hadn't even been armed, and she was already the single biggest variable, the most likely point of failure in this complex, fragile system. She was a spark. I was the extinguisher. She was a storm brewing in a sealed cabin, and I was the lightning rod, waiting for the strike. The plane door hadn't even been armed, and she was already the single biggest variable. She was a storm brewing in a sealed cabin, and I was the lightning rod waiting for the strike. But before the storm breaks, you have to map the battlefield. The soft chime for the flight attendant call button sounded, but it wasn't for a passenger. It was a signal. Leah, the purser, the lead flight attendant, moved down the aisle with practiced ease. Her smile was professional, plastered on with the precision of a makeup artist, but her eyes were sharp. She'd been flying this route for years. I recognized her from a dozen other uneventful trips. She was steady, the kind of crew member you want when things get messy. She stopped at my row. Her body was angled slightly toward me, blocking the view from the rows behind. "Mr. Monk," she said, her voice at a polite conversational volume, barely audible over the boarding music. "Can I get you a pre-departure water? We have still or sparkling." This was it. The quiet little dance of confirmation. It wasn't in any passenger-facing manual. It was a simple verbal handshake developed over decades of security protocols. The specific words could change, but the structure was always the same, a binary choice where the answer confirmed status. My answer was a countersign. "Still is fine. Thanks." I replied, my tone level. "It's been a long day." Leah's eyebrow ticked up a millimeter. Our whole plan was exchanged in that one pixel of movement. "Right away," she said to nobody in particular, and disappeared like good help always does. The word still was the key. It told her I was a designated Federal Air Marshal, FAM, on this flight. It meant I was active on duty, and that she and I were now partners in a silent contract to keep this flight safe. Her smile tightened fractionally, a barely perceptible acknowledgement. "Of course," she said and moved on. No one else in the cabin would have noticed the exchange. To Karen in 1C, it was just a boring man ordering boring water. But now, the most important person on the crew knew who I was and exactly where I was sitting. The first piece was on the board. I pulled out my phone, feigning interest in an article about interest rates, but my mind was already building a three-dimensional map of the cabin. My seating choice, 2A aisle, wasn't random. From here, I had a clear, unobstructed view of the cockpit door. I could see the forward galley, the lavatory, and every person who entered or exited that critical space. I was one row back from our live streaming problem in 1C, close enough to intervene in under a second. Specifically, 0.8 seconds if I lunged, but not so close as to signal any special interest. The aisle seat gave me mobility. I wasn't trapped against the window. Seconds matter, and being boxed in by a sleeping passenger is a liability I could never afford. My eyes scanned the cabin, not as a passenger, but as a predator assessing a new environment. I wasn't looking for threats in the traditional sense. Not yet. I was cataloging people, assets and liabilities. In seat 3D, across the aisle and one row back, sat a big man with a military-style high and tight haircut. He sat ramrod straight. His hands were clean, large, and resting on his knees. His knuckles were solid. He had the calm, watchful eyes of a man who has seen real trouble and wasn't impressed by it. Marine Corps, maybe, or retired firefighter. Tag, asset. If things go sideways, he won't panic. He might even help. Then my eyes shifted to 3C, directly across from the big man and diagonal to me, a man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit. He was sweating despite the cool cabin air. His leg was bouncing, a nervous, rapid-fire tap-tap-tap against the floor. He wasn't reading. He wasn't on his phone. His eyes darted around the cabin, checking the overhead bins, checking flight attendants, and then checking row 1. Specifically, he kept glancing at Karen in 1C. It was subtle, a flick of the eyes. But he did it 3 times in 30 seconds. Tag, liability. Why was he looking at her? Did he know her? If they knew each other, why were they sitting apart and not acknowledging it? Or was he just annoyed by her loud voice? I filed him away in the watch closely folder of my brain. The pre-flight announcements began, a soothing drone of safety instructions that 90% of the passengers ignored. I listened to every word. The real test wasn't on the ground. It was up there, in the thin, cold air where help is minutes away and trouble is only ever a heartbeat from your door. The jet bridge pulled away with a low groan, and the plane began its slow, lumbering pushback from the gate. This was the first major transition point. The moment we went from being a room connected to a building to a self-contained vessel. It's a psychological shift for everyone on board, but especially for someone like Karen. On the ground, she could, in theory, be removed. The gate agent, the ground crew, airport police, they were all still within reach. Once that door closed and we were under federal jurisdiction, the power dynamic shifted. She seemed to understand this, and ironically, it made her bolder. As we taxied toward the runway, the fastened seatbelt light chimed. The aircraft was moving. Karen unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, balancing on her heels as the plane turned a corner and reached for the overhead bin. "Excuse me, ma'am." Leah called out from her jump seat in the forward galley. She was already strapped in. "You need to be seated with your seatbelt fastened for taxi, takeoff, and landing." Karen waved a dismissive hand, not even looking at her. She was addressing her phone, which was still recording. "You see this, guys?" she narrated to the camera. "This is the kind of power-mad nonsense you have to deal with on commercial. I just need my hydrating face mist. My skin gets so dry on these flights, and I forgot to take it out." "Ma'am." Leah's voice remained calm but hardened. It was the voice of authority. "It is a federal aviation regulation. I need you to sit down and buckle up now." Karen finally turned to Leah, her eyes flashing with genuine anger. She held the latch of the overhead bin, defying gravity and the law simultaneously. "Do you know who I am?" she snapped. "I have over 2 million followers. One post from me, one bad review, and this airline stock will tank. Now, are you gonna let me get my face mist, or do I have to make this a thing?" The audacity was breathtaking. She was holding up a 737 for moisturizer. The nervous man in 3C visibly shrank in his seat as it tried to disappear into the upholstery. The asset in 3D shook his head, muttering something that looked like unbelievable. Leah didn't flinch. She was a pro. "I know you're frustrated, ma'am, but the rules are for everyone's safety, including yours. We cannot proceed to takeoff until you are seated. If you do not sit down, the captain will return to the gate and law enforcement will escort you off." The nuclear option. From my seat, I watched the exchange, my body relaxed, but my mind running to the protocols. If she refused, the pilot would have to turn around. It would mean a 2-hour delay, paperwork, a nightmare. But more importantly, it was a test of wills. Karen stared her down for a long moment. A silent battle playing out in the aisle of first class. The hum of the engines waiting on the tarmac seemed to grow louder in the tense quiet. Finally, with a dramatic, heavy sigh for her audience, Karen slammed the bin shut. "Fine," she snapped, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. "I'll just let my skin shrivel up and die because of your ridiculous, petty rules. I hope you're happy." She slumped back into seat 1C and slammed the seatbelt buckle into place with theatrical force. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "I'm being oppressed." Leah gave a crisp, professional nod and picked up the interphone to call the cockpit. Cabin secure. The crisis was averted for now, but it was a warning shot. Karen had tested the fence and found it electrified. She now knew the crew, or at least the purser, wouldn't be easily cowed. As the plane turned onto the active runway and the engine spooled up with that deep, powerful roar, I watched Karen. She wasn't looking out the window. She was typing furiously on her phone. And then, just as the G-force pressed us back into our seats and the wheels left the ground, I saw it. Karen lifted her phone slightly. She wasn't taking a selfie. She angled the screen backward toward the cabin. Across the aisle, the nervous man in 3C looked up. He caught her eye in the reflection of the glass divider. He nodded. Once. Quick. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They knew each other. They were communicating. And they were hiding it. Karen Tillman wasn't just an entitled brat. She was a diversion. And if she was the noise, the sweating man in 3C was a signal. We were wheels up. We were a closed system. And I knew, with the certainty of a man who has hunted wolves, that the hunt had just begun. A lone disruptor is a nuisance. A coordinated team is a threat. When the cabin lights dimmed and the champagne started flowing, the pieces on the board began to move. And I realized this wasn't just bad behavior. It was a play. The first hour of a flight is usually a deceptive calm. We had leveled off at 35,000 feet, leaving the twinkling grid of Los Angeles far behind in the darkness. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off with a cheerful chime, signaling the start of the in-flight service. For most people, this is a time to relax. Shoes come off, regrettably. Laptops open and the smell of heated nuts wafts through the cabin. For me, this is the soft zone. It's the period where vigilance naturally drops. The crew is busy with carts. The passengers are distracted by movies. If you're to make a move, you make it now. Karen Tillman was certainly making moves, though they seemed harmless enough to the untrained eye. She had flagged down Leah immediately. Champagne? Karen demanded, not looking up from her phone editing app. And don't bring me that domestic swill you tried to pass off earlier. I saw a bottle of the French Reserve in the cart. I want that. Leah, ever the professional, didn't argue. She poured the drink. Karen took it without a thank you, immediately holding the glass up to the light to inspect it for spots. She took a sip, grimaced for her camera, and then downed half of it in one go. Finally, she sighed to her followers. I need this to deal with the energy on this plane. It is toxic. When the cart came to me, I asked for another bottle of water. Hydration is the only defense against the jet lag and the headache building behind my eyes. I kept my table clear. No laptop, no book, just the water in my hands. Free and ready, my attention shifted to man in 3C, the partner. While Karen was putting on a show of luxury, he was deteriorating. He hadn't ordered a drink. He hadn't touched his entertainment screen. He was sitting perfectly still, but his eyes were vibrating with adrenaline. He was sweating through his cheap suit jacket. Then I saw the signal. It was so small, so mundane, that anyone else would have missed it. Karen finished her champagne. She held the empty flute up in the air, slightly to her right, wiggling it for a refill. It looked like typical entitled behavior, but her fingers tapped against the glass stem. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 3 taps. Across the aisle, the man in 3C stopped bouncing his leg. He took a deep breath, the kind a diver takes before going under. He looked at Karen. She looked at the reflection in her phone screen. They were synchronized. My internal threat level ticked up from yellow to orange. A lone drunk is a problem. A coordinated team is a tactical nightmare. Just as we were passing over the desolate, dark expanse of the Nevada desert, the environment changed. Ding, 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 ding. A frantic series of call button chimes echoed from the back of the plane. Economy class. It wasn't a single request for a blanket. It was a panic sequence. Rory, the junior flight attendant working the main cabin, came speed walking up the aisle toward the front galley, his face pale. He leaned in to whisper to Leah, but in the quiet of the night flight, sound carries. Row 28. Rory whispered urgently. Guy says he can't breathe, clutching his chest. He looks bad, Leah. Leah's face shifted instantly from hostess to first responder. Okay, she said, unlatching the medical kit from the wall. I'll go back. You stay here and watch the front. I think I need help moving him to the floor if we have to do CPR. Rory stammered. He was young, maybe 22. He was scared. Leah hesitated. Leaving the flight deck door unguarded is a violation of protocol, but a dying passenger is an immediate crisis. It's a classic dilemma. Go, she said. I'll follow. Make the PA announcement for a doctor. Leah grabbed the defibrillator and hurried toward the back of the plane. Rory followed. The forward galley was empty. The cockpit door was unmonitored. It was a textbook diversion. I leaned out into the aisle slightly. I could see the commotion in the back, heads popping up like prairie dogs, people standing in the aisle to look. The entire cabin's attention was focused on row 28. The medical emergency was a magnet for eyeballs. All eyes were looking back, except mine. I looked forward. The man in 3C, the partner, unbuckled his seatbelt. The click was loud in the silence of the first-class cabin. He stood up. He didn't look back at the dying passenger. He didn't look at the crew. He stepped into the aisle and turned toward the cockpit. At the exact same moment, Karen made her move. She didn't stand up. Instead, she slid her leg out into the aisle, effectively blocking the path for anyone trying to come from the back. She held her empty champagne glass out, waving it aggressively. "Excuse me," she shouted, her voice piercing the air. "I have been waiting 10 minutes for a refill. Is anyone working this flight?" She was creating a sonic wall. If a flight attendant tried to run back to the front, they would have to get past her legs and her screaming. She was a goalie. The partner in 3C was now 5 feet from the cockpit door. He wasn't going to the lavatory. He was moving with a stiff, awkward gait, his hand reaching inside his jacket. This was it, the overt act. In my line of work, we have strict rules of engagement. You cannot arrest someone for being weird. You cannot tackle someone for sweating. You have to wait for them to cross the line from strange to hostile, entering the sterile area of the cockpit door. While the crew is distracted, that's the line. The cabin lights flickered. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but tight. "Folks, we have a medical situation in the back. Please stay in your seats." We're also picking up some light chop, so I'm turning the seatbelt sign back on. As if on cue, the plane jolted. A sudden, sharp drop of turbulence. The partner stumbled, his hand bracing against the wall right next to the cockpit keypad. He recovered his balance, but he didn't retreat. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. It wasn't a weapon. It was a small, black electronic device. A jammer? A keypad bypass? Or just a heavy object to smash the lock? It didn't matter what it was. It mattered where he was. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait for backup. I moved. Hey! I shouted, a sharp, commanding bark designed to break his concentration. The partner froze, his hand hovering inches from the cockpit door panel. He turned his head, his eyes wide and terrified. Meeting mine. Get away from the door. I ordered, unbuckling and rising to a crouch in one fluid motion. Karen spun around in her seat. Excuse me, she yelled at me. Stop shouting. You are disturbing my peace. Sit down, economy trash. She didn't know the game had changed. She thought she was still playing customer service complaint. She didn't realize we had just switched to federal incident. The partner saw me rising. He saw the way I moved, not like a passenger, but like a threat. He made a choice. A bad one. Instead of backing down, he lunged at the door, slamming his fist against the reinforced steel, screaming, Let USIN. We need to talk to the pilot. He raised the object in his hand to strike the keypad. Contact. I yelled, more for the cockpit voice recorder than anyone else. I launched myself across the aisle. I ignored Karen's outstretched leg, stepping over it and kicking her carry-on bag out of the way. I hit the partner just as he swung. My shoulder drove into his ribs, pinning him against the bulkhead. The object, it looked like a heavy portable battery pack, clattered to the floor. Federal Air Marshal. I bellowed, my voice filling the small space. Get on the ground. Now! The cabin gasped. The gray man in the hoodie had just turned into a missile. But as I wrestled the partner down, tried to secure his flailing arms, I felt a sharp pain in my shin. Karen. She was out of her seat. She hadn't run away. She had joined the fight. She was kicking me with the heel of her designer stiletto, screaming like a banshee. Leave him alone. He's having a panic attack. You're hurting him. She grabbed my hood, yanking my head back, exposing my throat. Help! She screamed to the passengers. This man is attacking US. He's crazy. The partner, sensing an opening, bucked his hips, throwing me off balance. The plane lurched again, harder this time, dropping into serious turbulence. I stumbled back, fighting to keep my footing on the shaking floor. I had one hostile on the ground trying to get up, and one hostile on my back trying to claw my eyes out. The medical emergency in the back was a fake. The panic attack in the front was a lie. The trap had been sprung, and I was right in the middle of it. In the wild, a single wolf is cautious. It tests the perimeter. But a pack swarms. They don't need to be stronger than you. They just need to overwhelm you. As I fought to keep my footing in the shaking cabin, I realized I wasn't fighting a passenger. I was fighting a pack. The situation had devolved from observation to close quarters combat in less than 3 seconds. I was unbalanced, stumbling backward as the plane bucked violently against the air currents. The partner, the sweating man from 3C, was on the floor, scrambling to regain his footing, but the immediate threat was now behind me. Karen Tillman had a handful of my hoodie. She was yanking downward with surprising hysterical strength, pulling the fabric tight against my windpipe. It wasn't a trained chokehold. It was a frantic, clawing attempt to dominate. Get OFF him, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I am a citizen journalist. I am documenting this assault. She wasn't documenting anything. She was impeding a federal officer during an attempted cockpit breach. That's a felony with a 20-year price tag. Let go. I barked, tucking my chin to protect my airway. I couldn't punch her. Not yet. Use of force protocols are strict. You don't strike a civilian unless they present a lethal threat. Right now, she was an obstruction, not a killer. I dropped my center of gravity, spinning hard to the left to break her grip. The move worked. Her fingernails raked across my neck, leaving burning trails, but she lost her hold. She stumbled back into the bulkhead, gasping, her eyes wide with a mix of rage and genuine confusion. You touched me, she screamed. You touched a woman. I am a federal agent. I shouted, flashing my badge which hung around my neck, finally visible now that the hoodie was disheveled. Sit down. Now. For a split second, the badge registered. I saw her eyes flick to the gold shield. A rational person stops there. A rational person realizes the game is over. Karen Tillman was not rational. She was cornered, humiliated, and operating on a cocktail of champagne, adrenaline, and narcissism. I don't care who you are, she yelled, doubling down. You are ruining my trip. While I was focused on her, the partner had recovered. He wasn't a fighter, but he was desperate. He lunged for the loose item that had fallen from his pocket, the heavy battery pack. He gripped it like a brick. We have to get in, he screamed at Karen. Tell him to open the door. He swung the battery pack at my head. I saw it coming, a clumsy telegraph haymaker. I ducked, letting his momentum carry him past me. He slammed into the lavatory door with a sickening thud. But then the world tilted. Flight attendants, take your jump seats immediately. The pilot's voice roared over the PA, abandoning his calm demeanor. Severe turbulence. The plane dropped. Not a dip, a free fall. Gravity vanished for a terrifying second. My stomach hit my throat. The unsecured beverage cart in the forward galley, which Leah had abandoned to run to the back, lifted off the floor. It hovered in the air for a surreal moment. A 200-pound aluminum missile. Then gravity returned with a vengeance. The plane slammed upward. The cart came crashing down, tipping over and smashing into the galley cabinets. Bottles of wine, glass tumblers, and metal coffee pots exploded outward. Crash! The sound was deafening, like a gunshot in a closet. Red wine sprayed across the white galley walls, looking horrifyingly like arterial spray. Shards of glass littered the floor. The partner was groaning on the ground, clutching his shoulder. I was braced against the cockpit door, breathing hard. But Karen saw an opportunity. She was on her knees amidst the wreckage. Her eyes locked onto a jagged piece of dark green glass, the neck of a broken Chardonnay bottle. It was 6 inches long, with a serrated, razor-sharp edge where it shattered. It was a shank, a perfect improvised prison shank. She reached for it. Time stopped. If she'd picked that up, she wasn't an unruly passenger anymore. She was an assailant with a deadly weapon. If she'd picked that up, I would have to shoot her. Don't! I screamed, my hand flying to grip of my SIG sour under my shirt. Do not touch that glass. She looked at me. Her makeup was smeared, her hair wild. She looked at the glass. She looked at the cockpit door. I need to talk to the manager, she hissed, her logic completely fractured. She genuinely believed that if she could just threaten us enough, we would give her what she wanted. Her hand closed around the bottleneck. She stood up, brandishing the jagged glass. Move, she said, pointing the shard at me. Move, or I will cut you. I swear to God, I will cut you. This was it, the lethal threshold. I drew my weapon. The motion was automatic, thousands of hours of muscle memory taking over. I brought the pistol up to the low ready position, keeping it close to my body so she couldn't grab it. Drop the weapon. I roared, drop it or I will fire. The sight of the gun finally broke through her delusion. She froze. The color drained from her face. The other passengers, those who could see over the seats, were screaming now. He's got gun, someone yelled from row 4. I'm the police. I shouted back to the cabin, keeping my eyes on Karen. Stay down. We were in a standoff. A Mexican standoff at 35,000 feet, covered in red wine, shaking violently in the turbulence. She held the glass. I held the gun. The partner lay moaning on the floor. I couldn't shoot her, not with a cabin full of people behind her. A bullet could overpenetrate. It could hit a passenger. It could pierce the fuselage. I had to de-escalate, or I had to go hands-on. Karen, I said, using her name for the first time, keeping my voice low and hard. Look at me. You are holding a deadly weapon. You are 5 seconds away from dying. Do you understand? Drop the glass. She trembled. The glass shook in her hand. I just wanted... Behind me, the partner moved. He wasn't done. He grabbed my ankle. Get him, Karen, he wheezed. He yanked my leg. I slipped on the wine-slick floor. My knee hit the ground hard. My aim wavered. Karen screamed, a sound of pure panic and opportunity, and lunged. Not at me, at the cockpit door. She raised a glass shard of hammer on the keypad. To stab the mechanism. To break in, I was on one knee. She was past my guard. The partner was holding my leg. I was losing control of the wolf pack. Marcus. I screamed, looking back into the cabin at seat 3D. The big man with the military haircut was already unbuckled. He had been waiting. He had been watching. Green light. I yelled, "Take him." Marcus didn't hesitate. He launched himself from his seat, diving over the armrest like a linebacker. He landed squarely on the partner, crushing the man's breath out with a brutal, efficient elbow drop. "Stay down, dirtbag." Marcus growled. With my leg free, I pivoted. I didn't have time to stand. I launched myself forward from my knees, tackling Karen's legs just as her glass shard came down toward the cockpit door panel. We went down in a tangle of limbs, wine, and glass. The shard missed the door and gouged a deep scratch into the wall paneling. She kicked and screamed, slashing the air with the glass. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," I grunted, trapping her wrist and twisting it violently until her fingers sprang open and the glass skittered across the floor. "You're under arrest." I pinned her face to the wine-soaked carpet. I jammed my knee into the small of her back. She thrashed like a fish on a deck. "Stop fighting." I ordered. "Stop fighting." The turbulence slammed us again. The lights flickered and died, leaving us in darkness. The only light came from the emergency floor strips and the eerie glow of Karen's phone, which had fallen face up on the floor. It was still recording. And in the comments section, scrolling rapidly in the dark, I saw the tide turn. User 778. OMG, she has a knife. User Flying High. She's attacking the pilot? User Dave. Arrest her. Her audience was watching. And for the first time in her life, Karen Tillman wasn't the hero of the story. She was the villain. And I was the one who had to put her in chains. Chaos is easy to start, but hard to stop. Unless you're me. Once the cuffs go on, the movie ends. The director yells cut, but nobody goes home. Instead, the real world comes crashing in, bringing with it felonies, federal charges, and the realization that internet fame doesn't pay for a good lawyer. The floor of a galley in severe turbulence is the worst wrestling mat in the world. It was slick with premium Chardonnay, covered in glass shards, and pitching like the deck of a ship in a hurricane. Karen was pinned beneath me, her face pressed into the wine-soaked carpet. She wasn't fighting like a warrior. She was fighting like a toddler, thrashing, kicking, and screaming in high-pitched bursts of denial. "Get off me. I can't breathe. You're killing me." "You can scream, so you can breathe," I said, my voice flat and clinical. I reached into the small of my back and pulled out the flex cuffs. Thick, yellow, heavy-duty plastic restraints. These aren't the zip ties you use to organize cables behind your TV. These are designed to restrain a 250-pound man on PCP. I grabbed her left wrist. She tried to pull away. I applied pressure to the tricep pressure point. Not enough to injure, but enough to send a clear message. Resistance is painful. Her arm went slack. Zip. I grabbed her right wrist. Zip. I cinched them tight. Not tight enough to cut circulation, but tight enough that she would feel the plastic biting into her skin every time she thought about moving. "Karen Tillman." I said, close to her ear, loud enough to be heard over the engine roar. "You are under arrest for interference with a flight crew, assault on a federal officer, and attempted breach of a flight deck. Do you understand?" "I'm suing you," she spat, turning her head to glare at me, her cheeks smeared with wine that looked like blood. "I'm suing this airline. I'm suing the government. You have no idea who I am." "I know exactly who you are," I said, hauling her to her knees. "You're a felon." I looked over my shoulder. Marcus, the big passenger from 3D, had the partner pinned against the bulkhead. The partner wasn't fighting. He was sobbing. The fight had left him the moment Marcus's 240 pounds landed on him. "You good, Marcus?" I asked. "Solid," Marcus grunted. "He's done. Just crying now." "Leah," I yelled toward the jump seat. Leah unbuckled. The turbulence had subsided to a moderate chop. She moved instantly, handing me a second set of restraints from the emergency kit. She didn't look like a flight attendant anymore. She looked like a soldier. I tossed him to Marcus. Cuff him. Hands behind back. Marcus did it with professional efficiency. Zip, zip. Now came the logistics. We had 2 prisoners, a destroyed galley, and a cabin full of terrified passengers. We couldn't leave them on the floor. Up, I ordered Karen, grabbing her by the arm. She went dead weight, a classic passive resistance tactic. I can't walk. My ankle. Walk or be dragged, I said. Your choice. She walked. I shoved her back into seat 1A, the window seat. I pushed her deep into the corner. Then I took the seatbelt. I didn't just buckle it across her lap. I looped it through her cuffed arms behind her back, then buckled it. It's a field-expedient restraint technique. It anchors the prisoner to the frame of the aircraft. She couldn't stand up. She couldn't lean forward. She was effectively bolted to the plane. We did the same with the partner in seat 1B, right next to her. Now they were sitting together, side by side, looking like the world's most miserable couple on a honeymoon from hell. The partner was weeping openly, his head hanging low. Karen was hyperventilating, her eyes darting around the cabin, looking for an ally. She found none. I stood in the aisle, wiping sweat and wine from my forehead. My hoodie was torn. My knee was throbbing, but I was in control. I looked at the floor. The jagged glass shard, the weapon, was lying near the galley cabinets. Leah, bio bag, I said. She handed me a red biohazard bag. I carefully picked up the glass with a napkin, dropped it in, and sealed it. That's Exhibit A, I said, handing it to her, lock it in the cart. Mark the time. Then I saw the phone. Karen's iPhone was still on the floor, screen cracked but alive. I picked it up. The live stream had ended. Probably due to the turbulence or connection drop, but the recording was saved. That's my property. Karen shrieked from her seat. Give me my phone. You can't touch that. I held it up. This isn't a phone anymore, Karen. It's evidence. It captured the assault. It captured the conspiracy between you and him. And thanks to the cloud, the jury will see it in 4K resolution. I slid the phone into my pocket. That was the blow that actually hurt her. The cuffs she could rationalize as oppression. The arrest she could spin as martyrdom. But taking her phone? That was castration. She slumped back in her seat, a look of genuine horror on her face. She had lost her audience. I turned to the cabin. 50 pairs of eyes were staring at me. They were scared, confused, and running on high adrenaline. I needed to bring the temperature down immediately. I keyed the PA mic in the galley. My voice needed to be the God voice. Calm, deep, authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Federal Air Marshal speaking. The situation in the front of the cabin has been neutralized. The subjects are in custody. The flight deck is secure. We are in no danger. I paused, letting that sink in. We will be diverting to Denver for an immediate landing. Law enforcement will meet us at the gate. I need everyone to remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are going to get you on the ground safely. Thank you for your patience. I clicked off. A ripple of relief washed through the cabin. A guy in row 4 started clapping. Then the woman next to him. Soon, a scattered applause broke out. It wasn't a movie applause. It was the nervous, shaky applause of people realizing they weren't going to die. I walked over to Marcus. He was back in his seat, wiping his hands on a wet wipe Leah had given him. You move fast, I said quietly. Instinct, he said. Semper Fi. I'll make sure the FBI knows, I said. You saved me a headache with that second guy. He was soft, Marcus scoffed. But she's a piece of work. I looked at Karen. She was muttering to herself now, rocking back and forth against the restraints. I walked over to the cockpit door and knocked the code. The peephole darkened as the pilot looked out. I gave the thumbs up. The intercom chimed. The pilot calling the flight deck phone. I picked up. Status? The captain asked. His voice was tight. 2 in custody. Secured in row 1. Weapon secured. Cabin safe. No serious injuries, just some bumps and bruises. Copy that, Marshal. The captain exhaled. Denver Center has cleared us for a direct approach. We're burning hot and coming down fast. 20 minutes to wheels down. Police are rolling to the gate. Understood. We'll be ready. I hung up and looked at Leah. She was pale, shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. But she was standing tall. You okay? I asked, She nodded, smoothing her uniform. I will be after a very large glass of wine. Not the Chardonnay, though. I think I'm done with Chardonnay for a while. She gestured to the wine-soaked floor. We both managed a weak smile. We have 20 minutes, I said. I need you to prep the cabin for a priority landing. Keep everyone seated. No bathroom breaks. Total lockdown. On it, she said. I took my position in the jump seat facing the passengers, specifically facing Karen and her partner. This is the guard post. I wasn't relaxing. I was watching them. Karen looked up at me. The fire was gone from her eyes, replaced by a cold, reptilian hate. You think you're a hero, she hissed, her voice low. You're just a bully with a badge. My lawyers will destroy you. I will have your job. I will have your pension. You'll be working security at a mall when I'm done with you. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the threat. She was realizing that for the first time in her life. She couldn't speak to the manager. There was no manager. There was only the law. Karen, I said calmly, you assaulted a federal officer in U.S. airspace. You tried to breach a cockpit post 9/11. There are no lawyers good enough to fix this. You're not going to destroy my career. I leaned in closer. You just became a training video. The plane dipped its nose. The engines throttled back. We were descending. The show was over. Now, it was time for the credits to roll and for Karen to pay the bill. Gravity is the great equalizer. Up in the air, she thought she was a queen because she had a platinum card. But as we screamed toward the Denver tarmac, she was just another prisoner in row 1, bound for a jurisdiction where "let me speak to your manager" is not a legal defense. The descent into Denver wasn't a gentle glide. It was a tactical drop. The pilot, Captain Miller, was burning off altitude with aggressive efficiency. The nose of the 737 was pitched down, the engines at idle, creating a low, whistling hush that made every sound in the cabin amplified. I sat in the jump seat, facing the cabin, my eyes locked on Karen and her partner. The partner, whose ID I had pulled from his wallet and identified as Tabit, was completely broken. He was weeping softly, his head resting against the seat back in front of him. He knew. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a fever dream to find himself holding a smoking gun. But Karen was still bargaining. She twisted in her seat, wincing as the seatbelt looped through her flex cuffs pulled tight. Look, she whispered, her voice rasping. Officer, whatever your name is, we can work this out. I didn't blink. Marshal Monk. Marshal. She tried to put on a charming smile, but it looked ghastly with her smeared makeup and the wine stains on her teeth. I was just scared. You know? The turbulence. I have anxiety. My doctor can testify. I didn't mean to grab the glass. I was just panicking. If you let me go, I won't press charges for the assault. We can just call it a wash. I actually laughed. A short, dry bark of a laugh. A wash. I asked, Karen, you tried to stab a cockpit door with a wine bottle. You assaulted a federal officer. You conspired to breach the flight deck. This isn't a traffic ticket. You don't negotiate this. I have money, she hissed, abandoning the charm. I can make your life very easy or very hard. Do you know who my husband is? He plays golf with senators. That's great, I said, leaning forward slightly so only she could hear. He can ask them for a recommendation on a good federal defense attorney, because you're looking at 20 years mandatory minimum. There is no bail for air piracy charges. The blood drained from her face. The words 20 years hit her like a physical blow. She finally shut up. She stared out the window at the black void, perhaps realizing that the next time she saw a view this open, she would be 70 years old. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. The captain's voice boomed. The ground rushed up to meet us. The city lights of Denver spread out below like a carpet of scattered diamonds, cold, hard, and beautiful. The landing was firm. The pilot planted the main gear on the runway with authority. No floating, just getting us down and stopped. The reverse thrusters roared to life, a deafening mechanical scream that pinned us against our seatbelts. The plane shuddered, slowing rapidly from 160 knots to a taxi speed. And then silence. The engine spooled down. The hum of the air recyclers took over. We were on the ground. We were safe. The pilot didn't taxi to the terminal. He taxied to the penalty box, A remote hard stand far away from the gates, usually reserved for broken planes or security threats. Through the window, I saw the welcome party. It looked like Christmas in July. A sea of flashing red and blue lights illuminated the tarmac. There weren't just airport cops. There were black SUVs. There were SWAT trucks. The FBI had rolled out the heavy artillery. "Is that for us?" the partner, Todd, asked, his voice trembling. "That's for you." I corrected. The plane came to a halt. The fasten seatbelt sign turned off, but I stood up immediately and raised my hand. Everyone stay seated. I commanded the cabin. "Do not stand up. Do not open bins." The passengers froze. They were exhausted, scared, and fascinated. They craned their necks to look out the windows at the light show outside. The main cabin door opened with a hiss. Cold, fresh Colorado air flooded the cabin, smelling of ozone and tarmac. A team of 4 agents boarded immediately. They didn't look like customer service. They wore tactical vests emblazoned with FBI in bright yellow letters. They carried MP5s and moved with the jerky, precise movements of men expecting a fight. The lead agent, a tall woman with her hair in a tight bun, locked eyes with me. "Marshal Monk?" "That's me," I said. "Subjects are in 1A and 1B. Secured." "Good work," she said. She didn't smile. She signaled her team. "Secure the package." 2 agents moved to Karen. 2 moved to Todd. "Ma'am, I am Special Agent Ross with the FBI." The lead agent said to Karen, "You are under arrest." They cut my yellow flex cuffs. Karen rubbed her wrist for a second, a look of relief crossing her face, thinking maybe it was over. Then the steel cuffs came out. Click, click. The sound of steel ratcheting shut is final. It sounds like a cell door closing. "You're hurting me." Karen whined automatically. "They're too tight. They're sized correctly," Agent Ross said coldly. "Stand up." They hauled her out of the seat. She looked small now, without her phone, without her height advantage. Surrounded by armed federal agents, her influencer aura evaporated. She was just a middle-aged woman in a stained tracksuit who had made a catastrophic error in judgment. As they led her down the aisle toward the door, she tried to stop. She looked at me. "You!" she spat. "You ruined everything." I looked at her, my face completely neutral. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt tired. "No, Karen," I said, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "I saved you. If you had breached that cockpit door, the pilot carries a .40 caliber pistol. He wouldn't have wrestled you. He would have ended you." She blinked, the reality of what almost happened finally piercing her narcissism. "Move," Agent Ross ordered, pushing her forward. Todd followed, head bowed, weeping silently. He didn't say a word to me. He just looked at his feet. As they exited the plane, the passengers watched in stunned silence. There were no jeers, no cheering, just a heavy, solemn realization that they had witnessed the destruction of 2 lives. When the door closed behind the agents, the tension in the cabin finally broke. "Holy SH*T, the college kid in 4A whispered. I sat down in 1C, Karen's empty seat. I picked up a bottle of water from her abandoned tray. I didn't drink it. I just held it, letting the cool plastic ground me. Leah walked over. She was holding a trash bag for the debris, but she paused. "Are they gone?" she asked quietly. "They're gone," I said. "Federal custody. They won't be flying anyone, anywhere ever again." "Good," she said. She looked at the empty seat where Karen had sat. She said, "People like you don't belong in first class." I looked up at Leah. I smiled, a real smile this time. "People like me don't care about first class, Leah. We just care about the landing." She smiled back. "Well, you stuck the landing, Marshal." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dave, my history teacher friend. "Dave, flight okay? Did you get any grading done?" I looked at the text. I looked at the wine stains on the carpet, the scratch on the cockpit wall, and the flashing lights fading outside the window. I typed back, "No grading." Had to give it attention. The pilot came out of the cockpit. He was an older guy, gray hair, looked like he'd been flying since the Wright brothers. He walked straight to me and extended a hand. "Marshal," he said. I saw the monitor. That was close. "Too close," I agreed, shaking his hand. "You bought us time," the pilot said, "and you kept the cabin calm. We appreciate it." Just doing the job, Captain. Well, he said, adjusting his cap, the FBI wants a statement from all of us. Then the airline is putting us up in a hotel. Drinks are on me tonight. I might take you up on that, I said, but the night wasn't over. The arrest is just the beginning of the paperwork. I had reports to file, statements to give, and evidence to process. I stood up, grabbed my duffel bag from the overhead bin, and prepared to leave. As I walked down the aisle to deplane, the passengers started to stand up. The elderly woman in 1D, the one Karen had cut off during boarding, reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was shaking slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "My husband has a heart condition. I don't think he could have taken much more of that." "He's safe now, ma'am," I said gently. "Go get some rest." I walked onto the jet bridge. The cool air hit me again. I took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline finally wash out of my system. I was tired. My knee hurt. My head throbbed. But as I watched the FBI convoy driving away in the distance, carrying Karen Tillman to a holding cell where there were no managers, no mimosas, and definitely no Wi-Fi, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The rules applied to everyone. Tonight, we proved it. But little did I know, Karen had one more card to play. Not from a jail cell, but from the digital footprint she left behind. The video was out there, and the internet was about to pass its own verdict. There is no filter for a mugshot, no ring light, no angles, no edit button, just harsh fluorescent lighting and a number plate. For Karen Tillman, who lived her life in 4K resolution with skin smoothing turned up to max, the holding cell at Denver International was the first time she had faced unedited reality in years. The FBI field office at Denver International Airport is not designed for comfort. It is designed for containment. The walls are cinder block, painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. The air conditioning is set to morgue. The chairs are bolted to the floor. I sat in the observation room, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. Through the one-way mirror, I watched the disintegration of Karen Tillman. She was sitting at a metal table in interview room B. The handcuffs were gone, replaced by a single shackle locking her ankle to the table leg. She looked small. The bravado that filled the first-class cabin was leaking out of her, replaced by a jittery, manic energy. She was talking to the empty room. "This is entrapment," she muttered, picking at a wine stain on her expensive tracksuit. "That Marshal, he provoked me. He escalated the situation. I was a victim." Next to me, Special Agent Ross adjusted her glasses. She was a lead investigator, a woman who had interviewed terrorists and cartel hitmen. She was not impressed by a lifestyle influencer. "She still thinks she can spin this," Ross said quietly. "She's lived in an echo chamber for a decade," I replied. "She thinks a jury is just a comment section she can moderate." "Let's go break the news," Ross said. She picked up a file thick with paperwork and walked into the interrogation room. I stayed behind the glass. My job was done. This was a bureau show now. But I couldn't look away. I needed to see the moment the penny dropped. Ross sat down opposite Karen. She didn't introduce herself again. She didn't offer water. She just opened a file and laid out a series of photos. "Mrs. Tillman," Ross began, her voice devoid of emotion. "We have processed your partner, Todd B underscore. He has been very cooperative." Karen snorted. "Todd? Todd is my assistant. He does what I tell him. He's weak. Whatever he said, he's lying to save his own skin." "He told us the plan," Ross said. Karen froze. "What plan?" "There was no plan. We were just flying." Ross tapped a photo. It was a screenshot from a text thread recovered from Todd's phone, time-stamped 10 minutes before boarding. "Karen, remember, when the seatbelt sign goes off, you act sick. I'll make a scene about the service. We need chaos. I want a viral moment of me yelling at the pilot about our rights. Influencer takes command. It'll get 5 million views easy." "Todd, are you sure?" "It seems risky." "Karen, don't be a wuss. Just get to the door. I'll handle the rest." Ross looked up. It wasn't a panic attack. It wasn't bad service. It was a skit. You endangered 180 people for content. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's out of context. It was a joke. We were joking. "We also have the video," Ross continued. "Your own video. The one you were live streaming." Ross pulled out a tablet and pressed play. On the screen, Karen saw herself from the unflattering angle of the floor. She saw herself screaming. She saw herself grabbing the broken wine bottle. She saw herself lunging at the cockpit door while I tackled her. But more importantly, she saw the comments. The feed had been archived before the stream cut. The comments were scrolling on the side of the video in real time. User underscore Gen 99, is she drunk? User underscore McV. OMG, she's attacking the crew. User underscore Dad. That's a felony. She's done. User underscore Lizzie. I'm unfollowing. This is psycho behavior. User underscore brand deal at Karen Tillman, please remove our tag immediately. Your fans, Ross said, pointing to the scrolling text. They were the first ones to call the FBI. We received over 400 tips from your own followers while the plane was still in the air. They tagged the FAA. They tagged the airline. They handed you to us on a silver platter. Karen stared at the screen. The color drained from her face completely. The loss of the narrative was hitting her harder than the legal charges. They don't understand, she whispered. It's entertainment. No, Ross said, closing the folder with a sharp thud. It's federal crime. Ross leaned forward. Let me explain your Tuesday, Mrs. Tillman. You are being charged with interference with flight crew members in attendance. That carries a maximum of 20 years. You are being charged with assault on a federal officer. That's another 20. And because of the text messages, we are adding conspiracy to commit air piracy. Piracy? Karen squeaked. I didn't steal the plane. You attempted to seize control of the flight deck by force and intimidation, Ross said. That is the definition of air piracy. Karen finally started to cry. Not the fake, pretty crying she used for apology videos. This was ugly, snotty, heaving sobbing. The realization that she wasn't going home to her mansion. She was going to holding cell and then likely to a federal penitentiary. I want to call my husband, she wailed. You can call your lawyer. Ross stood up. Your husband has already issued a statement through his attorney. He says he is shocked and appalled and is cooperating fully with the investigation. He's distancing himself, Karen. You're toxic. Ross turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and the FAA has issued a civil penalty. You are being fined $52,000 for the diversion and the delay, and you have been placed on the federal no-fly list. Permanently. You will never set foot on a commercial aircraft in the United States again. I hope you like taking the bus. Ross walked out. I watched Karen alone in the room. She put her head on the metal table and screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated regret. I walked out of the observation room and met Ross in the hallway. She broke. I said, they always do when the cameras are off. Ross said, Todd pled out. He's giving us everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed she threatened to fire him and blacklist him if he didn't go along with the prank. So she coerced him. I nodded. Predatory. We have her dead to rights, Ross said. The video, the texts, the witness statements from the crew, and your report. It's a slam dunk. She'll do 5 to 7 years minimum. Maybe more if the judge wants to make an example of her. Good, I said. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a news app. Breaking. Influencer arrested after mid-air meltdown. Video shows assault on Air Marshal. The story was already out. The internet moves faster than the speed of sound. I clicked the link. The comments were brutal. The world wasn't laughing with her anymore. They were laughing at her. The schadenfreude, the joy in watching the mighty fall, was in full effect. Comment. Finally, someone held her accountable. Comment. I was on that flight. The Air Marshal was a ninja. She was crazy. Comment. Enjoy prison food, Karen. No gluten-free options there. I put my phone away. I need to get back to my hotel, I said to Ross. I have a flight back to DC tomorrow. Commercial? Ross asked with a smirk. Always, I said. Somebody has to watch the door. I walked out of the secure area and into the main terminal of Denver International. It was late, almost midnight. The terminal was quiet, save for the rhythmic swish-swish of a janitor mopping the floor. I walked past a newsstand. A TV screen was playing a loop of the evening news. They were already showing a censored clip of Karen screaming at me. I pulled my hoodie up and put my sunglasses on. I walked past a group of teenagers glued to their phones. "Did you see this?" one girl said. "This lady is insane. Total NPC energy." Her friend laughed. I walked past them, invisible again. The ghost in seat 2A. Karen Tillman wanted to be famous. She wanted the world to know her name. She wanted to stop the show. Well, she got her wish. Everyone knew her name now, but the show was over. And as I stepped out into the cool night air to hail a cab, I realized that for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like victory. But the story wasn't quite done, because while the criminal case was closed, the civil fallout and the personal reckoning was just beginning. And I had one last meeting to take before I left Denver. In America, you can sometimes wiggle out of criminal charges with a good enough lawyer. But the civil court system? That's a different beast. It doesn't care about your freedom. It cares about your assets. And when an airline decides to calculate the cost of a diverted 737, the bill is enough to make a millionaire weep. The morning after the arrest, Denver was bright, cold, and aggressively sunny. I sat in a booth at a diner near the courthouse, nursing black coffee and a plate of eggs I had no intention of finishing. My phone was vibrating every 30 seconds, not with work messages, but with news alerts. The algorithm had latched onto Karen Tillman and was tearing her apart like a pack of digital hyenas. Hashtag Flight from Hell was trending #1 on X, formerly Twitter. Air Marshal Takedown was #2. I clicked on a video analysis from a popular legal YouTuber. "Okay, guys," the lawyer on the screen said, pointing to a freeze frame of Karen holding the wine bottle. "I've seen some bad decisions in my life, but this is a masterclass in how to ruin your life in 10 seconds. She's looking at federal time. Sure, but wait until the airline sues her for the diversion. We're talking fuel, landing fees, crew overtime, passenger compensation. She just bought that plane, essentially." He wasn't wrong. A man in a sharp navy suit slid into the booth opposite me. This was Robert Vance, general counsel for the airline. He looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "Marshal Monk," Vance said, offering a firm handshake. "Thank you for meeting me. And thank you for saving our aircraft." "Just doing the job, Mr. Vance. Please call me Robert. And honestly, you did more than the job. You saved us a PR nightmare. If she had actually breached the cockpit," he shuddered, "the stock price would have tanked." He opened a leather portfolio. "I wanted to brief you on the civil side of things. Since you're the arresting officer, you'll likely be deposed for our lawsuit against Mrs. Tillman." "You're suing her?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee. "Oh, Marshal." Vance smiled, a cold, predatory expression that chilled the room. "We are going to eviscerate her." He slid a spreadsheet across the table. It was an itemized bill of the incident. "Let's look at the math," Vance said, pointing a manicured finger at the rows. First, the fuel dump. To land safely in Denver, the captain had to dump 20,000 pounds of jet fuel over the Rockies to get under maximum landing weight. That's about $35,000 right there. He moved his finger down. Diversion fees, landing fees at DIA, gate usage, ground crew. That's another $15,000. Then we have the crew. The pilots and flight attendants timed out. We had to fly in a reserve crew to get the passengers to their destination. Overtime pay, hotels, per diems, another $20,000. And the passengers? I asked. Compensated. Vance nodded. We gave every passenger on that flight a $500 voucher and 50,000 miles as an apology. There were 160 passengers. That's $80,000 in direct costs. Plus the fine. I added. The FAA fine is separate, Vance corrected. That $52,000 goes to the government. We don't see a dime of that. No, we are suing for our damages. And then there's the loss of business reputation clause. He tapped the bottom line figure. Total estimated damages, $485,000. Almost $500,000. I whistled low. And we will get it, Vance said confidently. We've already filed for an emergency freeze on her assets. We know she has equity in a home in Calabasas and a portfolio of stocks. We're going to take it all. By the time she gets out of prison, she won't be returning to a mansion. She'll be lucky to afford a studio apartment. It was brutal. It was excessive. And it was completely justified. What about the husband? I asked. He's got deep pockets, right? Vance laughed. Had. Past tense. Check the news. He turned his iPad around to face me. A headline from TMZ was splashed across the screen. Husband of airplane Karen files for divorce. Cites irreconcilable differences and PRE nuptial agreement. He filed this morning. Vance said he's cutting her loose. Under their prenup, any criminal activity voids her claim to spousal support. She's on her own, Marshal. No husband, no money, no career. I sat back in the booth. It was the total destruction ending. In the movies, the villain usually dies. In real life, this was worse. She was gonna live, but she was gonna live as a pariah, stripped of every single thing she used to define her worth. What about Todd? I asked the partner. Todd B underscore 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 underscore. Vance checked his notes. He's cooperating. He provided us with the emails where she threatened to fire him if he didn't help her with her content. We're going easy on him. He's a victim of her coercion, in a way. He's still banned from the airline for life, obviously. But we aren't suing him into poverty. Fair, I said. Vance closed his portfolio. You're a good witness, Marshal. Your report was detailed. The video evidence is undeniable. This will never go to trial. She'll settle, she'll pay, and she'll disappear. He stood up and dropped $100 bill on the table for the coffee. Safe flight back to D.C., Marshal. We'll be in touch. He walked out, a corporate executioner in a tailored suit. I finished my coffee. I felt a strange mixture of pity and satisfaction. Karen Tillman had wanted to be the main character. She had wanted to show the world how powerful she was. And, in a way, she succeeded. She had mobilized the FBI, the FAA, a major airline, and the court of public opinion. She had moved mountains, and then those mountains had fallen on top of her. I left the diner and headed back to the airport. I wasn't flying first class this time. I was flying economy, dead-heading back to base. As I walked to the terminal, I passed a Hudson newsstand. The incident was already on the front page of the local paper. Terror at 30,000 feet. Hero Marshal stops influencer attack. They didn't have my name, thankfully. Just Federal Air Marshal. That's how I liked it. I got to the gate. It was a different airline, a different flight. I scanned my boarding pass and walked down the jet bridge. As I stepped on the plane, the flight attendant at the door, a young guy with a bright smile, looked at my badge holder which I had forgotten to tuck into my shirt. He paused. He looked at me, then at the badge. Were you? He hesitated, lowering his voice. Are you the guy from the flight last night? The one with the wine bottle lady. News travels fast among flight crews. Faster than the internet. I gave a small, tired nod. That was me. The flight attendant's face lit up. He didn't say anything loud. He didn't make a scene. He just reached out and firmly shook my hand. Thank you, he whispered. Seriously, we deal with so much garbage. People treating us like servants. Spitting on us. Yelling at us. Seeing someone actually face consequences, it means everything to us. She won't be bothering you again. I promised. I know, he grinned. I saw the news. She's toast. He checked his tablet. Sir, you're in 24B middle seat? Yeah. I shrugged. Government travel budget. He tapped a few buttons on his screen. Not today, he said, handing me a new boarding pass. 3A, first class window. The captain insists. I started to protest. I can't accept gifts. It's not a gift, he winked. It's an operational security upgrade. We need our best assets in the front, right? I smiled. Right. Operational security. I took the ticket. I walked down the aisle, past the rows of tired travelers. I stowed my bag in the overhead bin of row 3. I sat down in the wide, comfortable leather seat. A flight attendant, a different one, appeared instantly. Pre-departure beverage, sir? Water? Juice. I looked at the tray. There was a bottle of expensive water and a glass of champagne. I thought about Karen. I thought about the wine soaking into the carpet. I thought about the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut. Water, I said. Still. Excellent choice, she smiled. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The plane began to push back. The engines hummed. The vibration was familiar, soothing. The storm was over. The bad guy was in jail. The good guys had won. And as the plane lifted off into the clear blue Colorado sky, leaving Karen Tillman and her ruined life far below, I finally let myself relax. I popped my headphones in. I put on a podcast about the Roman Empire. And for the first time in 24 hours, I fell asleep. But the story had one final twist. A letter that would arrive at my office 3 weeks later. A letter from Karen herself. Some people hit rock bottom and start climbing. Others hit rock bottom and start digging, convinced there's a basement where the manager lives. 3 weeks after the incident, I found out that Karen Tillman was still digging. The Federal Air Marshal Field Office in Washington, D.C. is a place of quiet bureaucracy. It smells of stale coffee and laser printer toner. It's the unglamorous backstage of the job, far removed from the adrenaline of a cockpit breach. I was at my desk, burying myself in the endless mountain of paperwork that follows any use of force incident. The Internal Review Board had already cleared me. The airline had sent a commendation letter. My knee was healing nicely. Life had returned to the gray zone. I was anonymous again, just another suit in a cubicle. Then the mail cart rolled by. Monk. The clerk called out, tossing a white envelope onto my desk. "You got fan mail. Certified." I picked it up. It wasn't a standard letter. The return address was stamped in red ink. Federal Detention Center. Englewood Inmate Mail. Inspected. The handwriting on the front was jagged, pressed hard into paper, as if the writer was trying to carve the words rather than write them. To Marshal Fred Monk. It was from her. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Usually, prisoners don't write to the officer who arrested them, unless it's a threat or a confession. I sliced it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined yellow legal pad paper. The writing was frantic, filling every margin, with words underlined 2 or 3 times for emphasis. I started reading. "Dear Fred, I'm calling you Fred because I feel like we have a connection now. A trauma bond. You'll understand. I am writing this from a cage. Can you imagine that? Me, in a cage. The food here is non-organic sludge. The lights hum constantly. The women here are animals. They don't know who I am, and when I try to tell them, they laugh. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Fred. At first, I was angry at you. I blamed you for ruining my life. But my spiritual advisor, a woman named Big T inside here, told me I need to control my narrative. So I forgive you. I forgive you for overreacting. I forgive you for manhandling me. I know you were just doing your job, even if you were too aggressive. You were probably intimidated by a powerful woman. It happens. I'm used to it. But here's the reality, Fred. We are both victims here. Victims of a system that wants to crush individuality. The airline, the FBI, the media, they're all spinning lies. They are painting me as a monster. But I have a plan. And you are going to help me. I am writing a book, Turbulence, the Karen Tillman story. It's going to be huge. Netflix is already interested, my agent says. It's going to be about mental health, about the pressure of fame, and about how a simple misunderstanding turned into a federal witch hunt. Here is your part. I need you to testify at my sentencing. Not against me. For me. I need you to say that I look scared, not hostile. I need you to say that the wine bottle was just something I grabbed for balance, not a weapon. If you do this, I can get the charges reduced to a misdemeanor. I can get probation. And in return, when the movie deal goes through, I will make sure you're taken care of. I can get you a consulting fee. Technical advisor. $50,000. Maybe more. You can quit that government job and buy some decent shoes. Don't be a hero, Fred. Be smart. The world has moved on to the next scandal. Nobody cares about justice. They care about content. Let's make some content together. Write me back. Don't let me rot in here. Sincerely, Karen. I put the letter down. I sat in silence for a solid minute, listening to the hum of the office air conditioner. It was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of delusion. Even after being arrested, humiliated, divorced, and sued, she still believed she was a director of the movie. She still believed she could manipulate reality if she just found the right angle. She thought she could bribe a Federal Air Marshal with a promise of a Netflix consultation fee. She didn't see me as a law enforcement officer. She saw me as a supporting character in her redemption arc. Monk! I looked up. My supervisor, SAC Special Agent in Charge Henderson, was standing by my desk. "You look like you just ate a bad oyster." "What's that?" I handed him the letter. "Read it. It's from Tillman." Henderson read it. His eyebrows climbed higher with every paragraph. When he got to the part about the consulting fee, he let out a low whistle. "She's trying to bribe a witness," Henderson said, in writing, from a recorded prison line. "She thinks it's a business deal," I said. "She doesn't even realize it's another felony." Henderson shook his head, tossing the letter back onto the desk. "Narcissism is a hell of a drug. What do you want to do?" I picked up the yellow paper. It felt flimsy. "Dirty. We don't reply," I said. "We send this to the U.S. attorney prosecuting her case." "It proves lack of remorse," Henderson noted. "It proves she's trying to suborn perjury. This kills any plea deal she was hoping for." "Exactly," I said. "She just added 5 years to her own sentence." I grabbed a red evidence folder and slid the letter inside. Karen had made one fatal miscalculation. She assumed that everyone operated on her currency, money and fame. She assumed that for $50,000, I would sell out my integrity. She didn't understand that some people like me, people like Leah the flight attendant, people like Marcus the Marine, operate on a different currency. Duty? I didn't want her money. I didn't want her movie deal. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. But there was one more thing. The son of Sam laws. I pulled up a fresh email to the prosecutor. Subject, USA v. Tillman, new evidence/asset forfeiture. Attached is a letter received from the defendant today. Please note the defendant's intent to profit from her crimes through book/film deals. I am formally requesting that the court invoke 18 U.S.C. section 3681, special forfeiture of collateral profits of crime. Any proceeds she attempts to make from this story should be seized and redirected to the victim's compensation fund or the airline to pay for damages. She doesn't get a movie deal. She gets a bill. I hit send. That was a final nail. She wanted to monetize her infamy. I just ensured that even if she wrote a bestseller from her cell, she wouldn't see a single penny of it. Every dime would go to the very people she had tormented. I leaned back in my chair. The letter was a gift, really. It confirmed that she hadn't changed. It confirmed that she was dangerous, not because she was a criminal mastermind, but because she was incapable of seeing other people as real human beings. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Leah. We had kept in touch. "Leah, hey Fred, just got my subpoena for the sentencing hearing next week. You going?" I typed back, "Fred, wouldn't miss it for the world. I'm bringing a letter she wrote me. You're going to love it. Leah, ominous. LOL. See you in court." The trial was skipped. Todd had pled guilty. Karen's lawyer, realizing the evidence in the new bribery attempt was insurmountable, had advised her to plead guilty to avoid a trial that would only embarrass her further. So, next week was a finale, the sentencing hearing. That's where the judge gets the final word. That's where the influencer meets the institution. I stood up and put on my jacket. It was 5 p.m. Time to go home. I walked out of the office into the bustle of DC traffic. I looked at the people rushing by, faces glued to phones, filming TikToks on corners, live streaming their walks. I wasn't angry at them. Most people are harmless, but I knew that somewhere in that crowd, there was another Karen waiting to happen. Another person who thought the rules didn't apply. And when they decided to step out of line at 35,000 feet, I'd be there, waiting. But for now, I had a date with a judge in Denver. And I was going to make sure Karen Tillman heard the one thing she hated most. No, the wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind exceedingly fine. In a federal courtroom, there are no filters, no followers, and no delete buttons. There's only the record. And when the gavel finally came down on Karen Tillman, the sound echoed louder than any scream she had ever made at 30,000 feet. The federal courthouse in Denver is a monolith of stone and glass, designed to make you feel small. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was cool and smelled of furniture polish and anxiety. I sat in the front row of the gallery, next to Leah. She was wearing civilian clothes, a simple blouse and slacks, but she sat with the posture of a flight attendant during turbulence. Upright, alert, ready. Marcus, the Marine, couldn't make it. He was deployed again, but he had sent a written victim impact statement that was 3 pages of single-space fury. We were waiting for the star of the show. When the side door opened and the marshals led Karen in, a collective intake of breath swept through the room. The Karen we knew, the woman in designer tracksuits, perfect hair, and sneering arrogance, was gone. In her place was inmate 89402. She wore a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, stripped of its dye and extensions, was pulled back in a severe, graying ponytail. She wore no makeup. Her skin looked papery and tired. She didn't look at the gallery. She looked at the floor. The shackles around her ankles clinked softly as she shuffled to the defense table. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. The Honorable Judge Sterling entered. He was an older man with a face like carved granite. He didn't look like the kind of judge who enjoyed courtroom theatrics. The proceedings began with the usual legal ritual. The defense attorney, a court-appointed public defender, her high-priced team had quit when the money ran out, tried his best. He argued for leniency. He spoke about mental health episodes and unprecedented stress. He tried to paint her as a victim of social media culture. Judge Sterling listened, his face unreadable. Then, it was the prosecutor's turn. "Your Honor," the assistant U.S. attorney said, standing up. "The defense argues that Mrs. Tillman is remorseful. They argue that this was a momentary lapse in judgment. However, the government would like to submit one final piece of evidence into the record for sentencing consideration." He held up the yellow sheet of paper. The letter. Karen's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. She saw the letter in the prosecutor's hand, and for the first time, she looked at me. The betrayal in her eyes was palpable. She genuinely thought we had a deal. "This letter," the prosecutor continued, "was mailed by the defendant to Federal Air Marshal Monk 3 weeks ago. In it, she attempts to bribe a federal witness with promises of a consulting fee from a future movie deal. She explicitly asked him to perjure himself to reduce her sentence." The courtroom went dead silent. The public defender put his head in his hands. He hadn't known about the letter. Judge Sterling extended his hand. "Let me see that." He read it slowly. The silence stretched for an agonizing 2 minutes. Karen was trembling now, her chains rattling against the table leg. Judge Sterling lowered the paper. He took off his reading glasses and looked directly at Karen. "Mrs. Tillman," the judge said, his voice low and dangerous. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen murderers with more remorse than you. You didn't write this to apologize. You wrote this to negotiate. I was just..." Karen stammered, standing up. "Sit down," the judge barked. "I haven't passed sentence yet." He opened a file in front of him. "You endangered the lives of 162 people. You assaulted a federal officer. You diverted a commercial aircraft, costing the airline nearly $500,000. And even from your jail cell, your primary concern was your narrative and a movie deal." He picked up his gavel. "Karen Tillman, I am sentencing you to 63 months in federal prison. 5 years and 3 months. A gasp went up from the back of the room, where a few reporters were sitting. "There is no parole in the federal system," the judge reminded her. "You will serve 85% of that time minimum. Following your release, you will serve 3 years of supervised probation." Karen began to sob. "Please, I can't do 5 years. I'll die in there." "You should have thought about that before you picked up a weapon," the judge said. "But we aren't done." He turned to the financial documents. "I am ordering you to pay restitution to the airline in the amount of $485,200. This will be paid via the liquidation of your remaining assets. If that does not cover it, your wages will be garnished for the remainder of your life until the debt is paid." He paused, looking at the prosecutor's motion regarding the son of Sam Law. "Furthermore," the judge said, his eyes narrowing, "regarding your book deal, under 18 U.S.C. Section 3681, I am invoking the special forfeiture of collateral profits of crime. You are hereby barred from profiting, directly or indirectly, from the retelling of these crimes. You will not write a book. You will not sell the rights to a movie. You will not do paid interviews. If you make one single dime from this story, the government will seize it immediately and redirect it to the Victims' Compensation Fund." That was the kill shot. The prison time scared her, but the anonymity, the inability to monetize her fame, that destroyed her. Her retirement plan, her comeback story, was legally incinerated. Remand to the custody of the Bureau of Prisons immediately. Judge Sterling said. Bang. The gavel strike was final. 2 marshals moved in. They pulled Karen to her feet. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was limp, broken, a marionette with the strings cut. As they led her past the gallery toward the side door, she passed within 3 feet of me. She stopped. The marshals tugged her arm, but she resisted for a second. She looked at me. Her eyes were red, puffy, and filled with a confusing mix of hatred and pleading. I made you famous, she whispered, her voice cracking. Nobody knew who you were before me. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I didn't offer her any pity. Nobody knows who I am now, Karen, I said softly. That's the point. The marshals yanked her forward. The door buzzed open, then slammed shut with a heavy metallic clank. She was gone. Leah let out a long, shaky breath. It's over. It's over, I agreed. We walked out of the courthouse into the blinding Denver sun. The air tasted sweet. I'm gonna grab a drink, Leah said. A very expensive, very quiet drink. You coming? I checked my watch. Can't. I'm on the 4 p.m. to Dulles. Leah smiled, shaking her head. You never stop, do you? Not while planes are flying, I said. We hugged. A brief, professional embrace between 2 people who had survived a war zone together. She walked toward a waiting Uber. I walked toward the train to the airport. Epilogue. 6 months later. The airport terminal was crowded. Thanksgiving rush. The air smelled of cinnamon pretzels and stress. I sat in my usual spot, gate C14, blending into the background. Hoodie jeans, scuffed sneakers. The gray man. I scrolled through my phone while I waited aboard. An update popped up on my news feed. Former influencer Karen Tillman transferred to low security facility. The ex-husband marries 24-year-old model. I swiped it away. Irrelevant. I looked up. A young woman was standing at the gate counter, screaming at the agent. She was holding a phone up, filming. This is unacceptable, she shrieked. I have rights. I'm gonna post this. I watched her. I saw the way her hands shook. I saw the entitlement in her posture. I saw the spark of chaos in her eyes. The gate agent looked tired. The passengers looked annoyed. I stood up. I picked up my duffel bag. I walked over to the boarding lane, positioning myself right behind the screaming woman. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, a silent, heavy presence. She turned around, sensing someone in her space. She looked at me. She saw a tired, middle-aged man in a gray hoodie. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. But then she looked at my eyes. And in my eyes, she saw something that made her pause. She saw the reflection of a prison cell. She saw the ghost of a career ended. She saw the absolute, unwavering promise of consequences. She didn't know why, but she felt a chill run down her spine. She lowered her phone. She stopped screaming. She turned back to the agent and muttered, "Fine, I'll check the bag." I smiled just a little. The gate agent looked at me and gave a tiny, confused nod of thanks. I boarded the plane. I walked past first class. Row 1, seat 1, it was empty. I walked back to row 12, the exit row. I stowed my bag. I sat down. I scanned the cabin. Asset in 12C. Liability in 14D. The door closed. The pressure sealed. The world outside fell away. I am Fred Monk. You will never know my name. You will never know I was there. But when the seatbelt sign turns on and the world goes dark, I'll be the one watching the door. And if you think the rules don't apply to you, try me